Just waiting for Facebook. All right. Hello and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about why we live for our parents' approval and their rescuing and their care and their love without even realizing that we're doing it. Okay, so the reason that I wanted to make this video specifically talking about how we can be caught in certain patterns in our life and caught in certain ways of thinking and caught in certain ways of doing things that don't actually feel good for us, that don't actually get us the results that we're looking for, that seem really confusing and nonsensical to us, how we can get caught in these patterns and how we can start to look for where these patterns came from in ourselves with a lot more compassion and a lot more curiosity than we might have right now, okay? So again, I am not a mental health professional. I am not here to diagnose or treat or to give any, this is what is true for everyone and this is what everyone should be doing. Again, my main intention with making this video specifically and all videos is just to spark some interest, just to open some ideas for new ways of thinking about things if you're getting stuck on your path of wanting to heal and feel better and do all of these things, and to, hopefully help you develop more self-compassion. Because I feel like, again, so much in the self-help and the psychology and the spirituality and the personal growth world, we are still stuck in a paradigm where we blame ourselves and where we believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with us when we can't make the changes to our lives and to our way of being that we want to make. That when we have certain patterns that we're caught in, when we have addictions and coping mechanisms and scapegoats and ways that we think and ways that we behave in our relationships and the ways that we treat our bodies and all of these things, and we have all of these patterns, and there's always, to me, not always, this is definitely changing now, but there, especially many years ago and moving forward, there has always been this kind of base understanding that we all just arrived in adulthood and started making bad choices and started having these negative habits for no reason, or self-sabotaging, or we don't love ourselves, or we don't have healthy relationships, we don't have healthy bodies, we don't and it's just there's something wrong with us, or that we made some wrong choice somewhere along the line, and that's how we got to where we are. And a lot of the help that is given is based around just kind of willpowering your way into doing something different, or shaming us into doing something different, or being nice to yourself as a kind of like back door to try to force yourself to be different. All again with this underlying assumption and this underlying kind of message that again, you're an adult and you're just making bad choices. And I just don't believe that that is true. In my opinion, from what I have observed of humans and human psychology and what we're starting to understand now, more and more as people get into trauma work and as we're becoming a little bit more compassionate in the self-help and spirituality and personal growth world, we're starting to see that, like, no, everything that we do and everything that we are and all of these habits came from somewhere. That they came from us trying to do the best we knew to do. And they came from us being taught how to do things. And they came from us having a history that was imperfect, and that our education was imperfect, and our environment was imperfect. And we faced not having our needs met, and we faced being rejected, and we faced being abandoned, and life is complicated. And we are navigating the best we know how to navigate, and also understanding that we have nervous systems and parts of our brains and parts of our bodies that get programmed and then run unconsciously and subconsciously. And that change is not just a matter of becoming consciously aware and then doing something different. that change often comes with an emotional process and with, again, really understanding what our needs are, how our current behavior is meeting our needs, how our current behavior is something that got programmed in that we have to do in order to be safe, even if that's not how it is now in our new environment. And working with all of this information to understand that change is often a multi-pronged approach of really understanding our history, really understanding where we got to where we are, understanding our programming, understanding our needs, understanding our desires, understanding the reality we actually live in, and then taking practical steps from there to do what we can. Okay? So again, I fundamentally believe that we are capable of change. I fundamentally believe we are capable of rewiring our programming. I fundamentally believe that we are capable of creating better lives for ourselves than the ones that we have. I don't believe in fate, that everything that happened to you is just what happened to you and there's no free will and you're just running a program. Nor do I believe we have complete control and we can absolutely become anything we want to become, and that necessarily everything is overcomable for some maximal result. It's somewhere in the middle. We have control, we have power, we have things we can do, and we are programmed, and we have histories, and we have stuff we have no control over. And that is the kind of center point of where we want to be focused on when we're trying to improve our lives, is to understand that we don't have complete control, that we didn't choose our programming, that we didn't choose our histories, that we didn't choose the environment we were raised in, we didn't choose necessarily the environment we're in right now. However, we have some power and we have some control. Okay, so that's that there. So again, to bring this back to how most of us are subconsciously living for our parents' approval and living for our parents' rescuing, even if we're not looking specifically for our specific caregivers. So I'm going to say caregivers now instead of parents, because I know there are multiple ways that we can be raised, and there are multiple situations in which, hello, so happy to see you here. There are multiple situations that we can be brought up in, and also it's not just our biological parents that dictate to us what our perception of the world is going to be. Yes, when we are raised by any number of authority figures that have some say and some sway over our safety and over our needs being met and over our pleasure and over our pain, all of that is going to be part of our conditioning. Okay, so caregivers is what I would like to say more for the rest of this talk, and it's just the people who were in your life that had influence over your perception of self and your perception of reality is these people. Okay, and again, we have to fundamentally understand and recognize that as small children, so from the age of 0 to 7 and beyond, we did not have full cognitive capacity. Number one, we were not little adults with little adult brains, with little adult logic, and just smaller bodies. Our brains were developing, and they were developing at a rate that we could not make sense of actual reality for how it actually was. And to understand that, and to have that get programmed into our brains and our bodies for how reality is. We had limited perception of self, we had limited perception of caregivers, we had limited perception of reality, and we also had the meaning-making part of our brains, the storytelling part of our brains that was activated and that was creating stories and was creating meaning out of the experiences we were having from our childlike and childhood understanding of reality, that were then being programmed in as this is true about me and this is true about reality. Okay, I don't think that we can ever overemphasize just how profound it is that we understand that when we were in the beginning of our lives, setting down the foundations for this is how I'm going to fundamentally view myself and view the world. We were getting our foundational perception. So again, not just what we saw. We were the framework for how we see, how we interpret our reality, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive what is and isn't good, is and isn't right, was being laid down. The filter that we use to be how we determine what is and isn't true was being given to us in a time when our brains were not fully developed and we were not relying on our pure logic mind that could understand cause and effect and that could understand other people and all of these things in order to come up with this perception. Understand that. When we were getting our filters, we had a child brain. We had childhood reasoning, childhood logic, childhood understanding. And those were the foundations for how we learned to think about ourselves and how we learned to think about the world. How we learned to interpret what was and wasn't safe, what was and wasn't good, what was and wasn't required for life. Okay, second thing that again, I do not think can be overstated. I don't think we can understand this about ourselves enough. What we perceived as children in our relationship with our caregivers was that our caregivers had complete control and complete knowing and complete understanding of us and how to meet our needs and what we needed and what we wanted, how to make our pain go away and how to make us have pleasure. That was our perception, that there are these gods who have access to everything, who know everything. And when I'm suffering and when I'm struggling and when I need something or when I want something or when I express something or whatever, their perspective, their point of view is always correct. And if they aren't giving me something, or if I'm in pain and they aren't helping take it away, we perceived that as they were doing that because of something about us. Always. Okay? I'm listening to another podcast. It's called Celebrity Memoir Book Club, and they're going over Molly Shannon's memoir. And in Molly Shannon's life, when she was 4 years old, her mother was killed in a car accident. And as a 4-year-old, Molly Shannon, in her 4-year-old brain, somewhere along the line, decided that part of the reason why her mom left was because of her. There's a line in her book where she literally says something about, like, there had to have been something not good about me or something unlovable about me or something wrong about me. And that was the reason mom left. And of course, to our adult brain, we can understand she was killed in a car accident. She didn't leave you. It had nothing to do with you. But in our childhood perception, everything that our caregivers do is because of us on some level. We are in a complete codependent relationship with our caregivers, meaning we rely upon them for absolutely everything. So again, we are getting our foundational view of how the world works, how to perceive ourselves in reality. On top of that, we're getting our foundational understanding of how to get our needs met, how to get our needs met, how to make pleasure happen, and how to make pain go away within the context of a completely codependent relationship where we are not capable of meeting our own needs, we are not capable of understanding ourselves, we do not have autonomy to make ourselves safe, to make ourselves okay, to get what we need, to make our pain go away on our own. When we were getting the foundations for this is how reality works, we were in a temporary codependent relationship that was going to change. So again, can we understand how fundamentally important it is to understand that? Our base wiring all got programmed around the context of a relationship where all of our needs were met by someone and something outside of ourselves. And we were being foundationally laid in that is how reality works. We get our needs through the intermediary of this caregivers that are around me. On top of that, we start to have our meaning-making brain making everything about us and our behavior. And it's my theory that it's because that was the part of us that we had control over. We couldn't control our bodies. We couldn't control the environment. We couldn't go and get our own snack. We couldn't do all of these things. All we had control over, the thing that seemingly seemed to be what was causing caregivers to give us love, to give us nourishment, to give us safety, to give us support, to give us what we needed, to take pain away, to make things better, to support us and to protect us, seemed to be how we were behaving. That was our perception. Our behavior determines whether the people around me meet my needs or not. And that is our foundational understanding of how reality works. Acceptance equals survival. And acceptance by these specific people with their specific rules equals safety, provision, and everything that I need. Because caregivers have everything. Remember that. In our perception, we did not realize that caregivers did not have access to all answers, did not have the capacity to make all of our pain go away, did not have the capacity to make everything better for us. We didn't realize that. We didn't see that. We didn't know that. We didn't have the capacity to perceive that caregivers might be doing things and saying things and behaving in ways that had nothing to do with us. That they maybe were sad or depressed or had a hard day at work or whatever, and they took it out on us, or they were distant, or they couldn't meet our need. And we still think it was because of something I did. It had to have been something about me. It was something about my behavior. It was something about the way that I am that caused them to punish me or to reward me. So again, can we understand how deeply and profoundly effective that would be for us as children? That love, approval, and safety comes from, that love and provision and safety, everything that we want, comes from being approved of from my behavior by these specific people who are the arbiters of my experience. That is what we learned to be the foundation for how reality works. We learned that in our bodies. We learned that in our brain stems. We learned that in the primitive young parts of our understanding. Which means absolutely nobody listening to this video right here, right now, walked into adulthood and just decided to start making bad choices about their life. Never once in all of human history has someone had clear, these are your two options. You can either healthfully express your emotions and healthfully process your sadness and your anger and your upset about these things, and you can learn to understand what these things are telling you, and you can adjust your life accordingly to make it so that you feel good. Or you can you tell my parents that? LOL. I think, again, I know that you say that as a joke, but like I know. I wish we could tell all of our parents that. I wish we could, and I think that we are. I hope that more people like me talking about this stuff means that the next generations and people who are parenting their kids are going to do it differently. But I think, again, what I want to offer is the biggest thing for right now is that you tell that to yourself. Right? Your parents might not understand. Your caregivers might not understand. Society is not going to understand. Society still says, like, we need discipline, and you're fucked up, and you're doing bad things, and you have a mental health issue, and you have this issue, and you have an addiction, and da-da-da, and you're broken, and you're bad, and there's all these things that are wrong with you, and you need to fix them. And this is just so fundamentally not true. It's just not reality. And again, I just feel like I can explain it as like, here's how we got here. Whatever it is you needed to be in order for your child brain to think that you were being approved of by your caregivers at any given moment is what got programmed into your brain. That is what is going to give you safety. That is what is going to give you provision. That is what is going to make it so that you can feel good in your life. That is what's going to make it so that someone will come and take all your pain away. This is what we have to understand about ourselves. We were fundamentally, as in this is what our foundations were. This is how we first started to understand ourselves in reality. Taught that pleasure and heaven and getting what we want and being taken care of was available so long as we did the right behaviors. Our behavior was the only thing we had control over. And in our perception, we had these gods who had access to everything we needed. And if they would just approve of us, and if they would just love us, we would have the safety, the provision, the rescuing from pain that we wanted. And we perceived that any amount of not getting our needs met and not having what we wanted and having pain that wasn't taken away was because of us failing to meet that expectation on some level. And those expectations of what our parents wanted from us and what we perceived the expectations were are not necessarily even what the actual expectations were. Again, much of the time, the way we perceived our caregivers' behavior and what we were making it mean about us wasn't actually even reality in our parents' perception. Like, I'll give you a personal story. In my household growing up, I listened to my dad talk over and over and over again about how horrible it was that his nieces and nephews asked his sister for money. That my grown adult nieces and nephews are constantly asking my sister for money, and this is just horrible, and they need to just grow up, and they just need to get on with their own lives, and they need to stop costing so much. And I also perceived that he was constantly stressed about money, and I could see that I costed money and that he was stressed about that. So I grew up with this entire narrative in my head that you never go to your dad for money, ever. If you need something, if you want something, you figure it out on your own. You do not ask your parents for money, because the worst thing that a child can do as an adult is ask their parents for money. So I literally started working my own job, like a job at 14, and I was a babysitter. I babysat every single weekend from 12 until the time I was 16 when I could get a real job, and I worked that job all the way through high school and all these things. And into my adulthood, it literally did not matter how much life costed. There was absolutely nothing within my being that was going to let me ask my father for money. I was seeking his approval subconsciously forever through this, I'm going to be financially independent. I'm never going to need my parents to ever give me money. I did not go to university. I did not get a secondary education because I could not pay for it myself. Yes? And this was such a deep program in me that years later, I came to my dad and I was telling him about these times where I literally had very little money and I was scraping by and all these things. And he was like, why didn't you ever ask for help? Why didn't you ever ask me for money? And I was like, what? Because you very clearly explained to me that to ask for money was the worst thing you could possibly do. And he was like, well, I didn't mean that about you guys. Just referring to me and my sister. I said those things about your cousins, but I didn't mean that about you. You're different. And I was like, what? What do you mean I'm different? No, I'm not. How was I supposed to know that? Right? And that's just one example of, And then again, like to put it in another way, like a lot of the time I know that children growing up with parents who are stressed out and who have jobs and who have all these other responsibilities, and there was lack of patience, or there was just not a loving, caring parent who was there to say, like, these are your needs and this is what you want and let's work through your emotions and all these things. Like, we learn to reject our emotions and to reject certain parts of our personality and to reject certain things and all that stuff. And that wasn't even necessarily the expectation of our caregivers. And that wasn't actually because their caregivers didn't like that about us or didn't want us to be able to have that or whatever. They were just stressed or overwhelmed, or they couldn't handle it at the time. And we were perceiving them pulling away, or them not being there for us, or them not doing whatever it is that we needed them to do, as being something because of us. And sometimes it literally had nothing to do with us, right? Like, mom wasn't there for your recitals, not because you suck or because she didn't think you were worth it or whatever, but like, she had to work and she couldn't be there. But our childhood mind doesn't understand that. We are constantly internalizing what our parents' behaviors towards us were as being something about us. Because again, in our perception, they held the keys to absolutely everything. They held the keys to us being safe, us getting our needs met, us being rescued from pain we didn't want to be in, and giving the pleasure that we wanted. And to our childhood perception, it was our behavior that was determining that. And it was our behavior that either led to their approval or led to their disapproval. So this is why in our adulthoods, we can seemingly continue to pursue doing things that are objectively painful for us to do. We can pursue jobs, we can pursue relationships, we can pursue habits where we're constantly getting ourselves way in over our head, or overworking ourselves, or doing whatever it is that we're doing. And we're constantly like, why can't I break myself out of this habit? Why can't I stop myself from always pushing myself too far? Why can't I stop myself from continually going into these kinds of relationships and doing these kinds of things? And the reason is that we have some program deep down inside of us that says, this is how you have to be and this is what you have to do in order to get your needs met. So as much as whatever we're doing might not be actually meeting our needs in real reality, as much as harm and chaos that might be coming from our overworking, or from our being in this type of relationship, or from taking on too much responsibility, or not doing a certain thing, or pursuing a certain career path, or not pursuing a certain career path, whatever kind of destruction or chaos or whatever it is that is happening because of that, we are still going to go after it. Because there's something deep down inside of us that says, if I do it right, I'm going to get everything I want on the other side. I'm finally going to be seen, I'm finally going to be loved, I'm finally going to be approved of, and then I will be safe, and then I will be happy. And we will continue to pursue things that hurt, and that suck, and that are painful, and that clearly aren't leading us where we want to go, and not have any idea why we keep doing it. And it's literally because deep down inside, we're going to continue to push for whatever it is we think we need to become, we feel deep down we need to become in order for our parents to approve of us, and then we will be safe. And it can happen on the flip side, where when we start to grow into adulthood, and we start to take a path that's different from what our caregivers subconsciously programmed into us is the way we have to be, and we start to go another way, we might feel like we're constantly failing and constantly fucking up, and like there's this constant anxiety and this constant dread and this constant fear that no matter how well something is going and no matter how good it seems to be doing, we don't feel safe or good in it. And there's this, like I say, this constant underlying fear that it's not right and that it's wrong. That's coming from, we have abandoned our conditioning. We have gone outside of what we were programmed to believe is the way we're going to get our needs met and how we're going to keep ourselves safe. And therefore, we feel very vulnerable and like we're not going to be safe. Okay, so now let me say these things in less general terms so that it can maybe make a little bit more sense. Okay, so I'm gonna just give examples from my own life. Yeah? Okay. So again, that story I just told about being financially independent and never asking anyone for money, because the worst thing you could possibly do is ask somebody else for money. That got programmed into me really, really early on. Okay? And literally now, okay, I've been with my husband for 12 years, and we've been in what was essentially a marriage. Like, on paper, we weren't legally married, but we were living together, we started sharing finances, we started doing all these things for the last 10 years. Like, it's been a long time. And up until very recently, up until a few years ago, I still fully and completely had it in my head that if I was not making enough money to support myself, that if he left, it was okay, that I was a burden on him. And no matter how much, so then what that led to was, in our relationship and in my life in general, I was constantly pushing myself to work harder and to work longer and to do more than was actually healthy for our relationship, was healthy for my body, was healthy for my spirit. And I could not get myself to stop. Like, literally, I would push myself and push myself and push myself and push myself and get so exhausted and so burnt out that it would be not good. And then I would pick myself back up again, put myself all back together, and keep going. And like I say, it was at the detriment of our relationship. He was constantly like, so this was the real reality. The real reality was that Marcus, the actual man that I was actually with, would have preferred me to work less, depend on him financially a little bit more, so that we could have a healthier relationship, and so that I wasn't working all the time, and so that I wasn't burning myself out. He genuinely cared about my physical health. He genuinely cared about my mental health. He genuinely cared about us as a couple. And he wanted me to stop pushing myself so hard and to stop overworking and doing all this stuff to make enough money so that if he didn't have to pay for me. But my psychology, and he would like literally physically with his words tell me that. And I would be like, there's no way that's possible. You're lying, you're saying that now, but if I actually did it, you would leave me, and then I'm dependent on you, and that's like the worst thing possible, and I'm a burden, okay? Because my subconscious programming was that I was a burden, and that having needs is a burden, and having wants is a burden, and if I'm not fully and completely self-sufficient, I'm a horrible burden. So again, I lived my life like that, and I burned myself out over and over and over again, and I pushed myself like way over the edge multiple times for years before I was able to be like, okay, I'm literally doing this because I believe one day if I just work hard enough and support myself enough and make enough money, that I'll finally be safe. And that was the end goal, the ultimate thing, right? It's that if I can just earn my daddy's approval by being self-sufficient and doing all these things and having enough money and never needing anybody and never asking anybody for money, daddy is gonna love me. And when I get that love, that means I am safe, I'm provided for, everything is good. When in real reality, doing that was getting me the exact opposite results. I was not safe. I was not secure. I was not happy. I was not healthy. You see what I'm saying? The programming was so hard that I continued to go down a road that made no logical sense. Because in my nervous system, doing the other thing was so horrifying that I couldn't even conceive of doing it for a while. And working with my husband and working with my nervous system and learning to slowly peel back and do what I needed to do so that this could be a sustainable thing and all of that stuff was a long process of learning that becoming who my dad wanted me to become wasn't going to equal safety, wasn't going to equal ultimate love, wasn't going to equal, because that's the other thing, right? Like I was projecting onto my husband that he will love me more, he will love me better when I'm self-sufficient and when I'm doing these things that make it so that I don't need him. And he was like, I want you to need me sometimes. I like being needed. I like supporting you in some ways. Like it's not, I don't want you to be a completely independent robot who like, and that was like a huge, I'm living for my father's approval and I'm projecting it onto Marcus and I'm projecting it out onto the world that everyone expects this from me and I'd be a huge failure if I wasn't like this, and all the stories and all of the and that's the other thing about this that usually goes along with this is that our stories and our why we have to be this way and why we have to do this, we are going to continue to build on that from our childhoods into our adulthoods. So like I wasn't sitting there consciously thinking I just want my daddy to love me. Of course not. As an adult, I'm like, well, no, like it's not respectable to be someone who relies on other people. It's not mature. It's bad. It's wrong. And I had all these other sources of information that I was getting that I was using to reinforce this narrative that I had gotten as a child. And my brain was filtering out the literal words from my husband's mouth telling me he didn't want that and he didn't think that way and that's not what was going on because it didn't match my perception. You see what I'm saying? So that story that I got from my dad in the beginning, that you need to be financially self-sufficient and that's the only way that anyone's ever going to love you, I then continued to acquire narratives as an adult that fed into that idea. And my perception filtered out anything that contradicted that idea. So then as an adult, it's like, this just makes logical, perfect sense. I have to keep burning myself out. I have to keep doing this thing. Otherwise, I'm a bad person. And it's that right there, that phrase. When you say to yourself, if I don't do this, I'm going to be a bad person, that's right when you know that that's some conditioning to look at. It's probably conditioning. If the reason you're doing what you're doing or not doing what you're doing is because you don't want to be a bad person, that's when you want to say, okay, there's something deeper here. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that now you just go and like do whatever and we don't want to be good people. It's how did we even come up with the idea of what a good person is? How do we even know what morality is? How can we determine, what would it mean to actually be a bad person by your definition? And what would actually happen in real reality? Because that was the thing. Right? I'm going to be dependent on my husband and that makes me a bad person. In real reality, it did not equal negative consequences for anybody. And in fact, it equaled positive consequences for almost everybody. Which means my definition of what a good and a bad person wasn't correct. It was based on childhood conditioning. I was living to be a good person by my father's standards. And in so doing, I was actually causing more destruction than I was causing not destruction. And for me, my adult definition of a good person is someone who is mindfully trying to create as little chaos as possible and to create as much order as possible. So by continually working myself to the bone and not depending on my husband and doing all these things, I was actually causing more destruction than I was to rely on him a little bit more. And therefore, I was actually being a bad person trying to be a good person. Does that make sense? Okay, so absolutely, and I totally get how the nice, caring things people say can't even land, the conditioning is so loud. That's exactly it, right? We have to understand that our conditioning has changed our perception. It's changed our filter. This is what we're looking at. So this is why so much of the work that I do here is around feelings. Because again, my conditioning, my programming was so hard, and like I say, When we're in our adulthoods, we are not operating from, this is my childhood condition, this is what daddy told me, this is what mommy told me, this is what caregiver told me, and this is what I need to do to be a good person. And by be a good person, what I really mean is be approved of so I can get my needs met. Because that's really what we usually mean by good person. We're going to be rewarded with our needs being met and our pain being taken away. When we are trying to be good, that is what we mean. We want to be approved of so that we get our needs met. And we, again, are not going to see that. And from childhood all the way up into your adulthood, you have been building stories and collecting evidence to support your foundational understandings of reality that support what you believe based on your conditioning. And you have been filtering out evidence and understanding and stories that contradict that message. This is how programming works. Programming is not just a story we are consciously aware of and that we walk around with. It's an unconscious story. It's an unconscious assumption about how reality is and how you are that then again makes it so that you can't perceive the things that contradict your story and that highlight and enhance anything that supports your story. And that's our mind's way of making us feel safe, because the reality that we live in is so complex and contains so much stimulation and so much information and so many options at any given time that if we don't have a foundational framework assumption for this is how life is in order to make decisions from, we would be literally caught in overwhelm at all times. Our filter makes it so that we're not taking in all the information at all times, because then we would be literally decision fatigue 24/7. We would never be able to make a choice because life is so complicated and life is so complex. So in order to hack our programs, so again, this is what I was trying to say there. I had to start to lean into my feelings and see that my feelings were contradicting my intellect. My feelings were contradicting my stories. My outcomes were contradicting my stories. I did not feel good. I was tired and I was burning myself out and I was stressed out, and my feelings did not match my stories. And again, my outcomes did not match my stories. I was causing more destruction to my body, to my relationships, than I was causing order in my work. So if what I was doing was right and was making me a good person, why was it giving me such negative results? And why was it making me feel so terrible? This is where I always say, right, this is how we hack our perception. Is we start to trust our feelings and we start to trust our outcomes more than we trust our stories. More than we trust our intellect, who can explain all of this away and make it all make sense. Because again, my intellect could make it all make sense, that I need to keep working like this and I need to keep doing this, and it was also wrapped into like you need to be of service and you need to be doing all this stuff, and like the only good thing about you is what you give to other people, and like I had so many stories about my work. And I probably still do. I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect, but I have more awareness now than I ever had before. And I hope to have more awareness as I continue to grow. That I had to really stop and say, I'm not getting the outcomes that I'm telling myself I should be getting. I have all of this logical reason for why what I'm doing is the right thing, and it makes perfect sense. But when I weigh it against the actual outcomes, and when I weigh it against my actual feelings, it doesn't match. And so I have to doubt my mind. And that's a huge part of this. Okay? So that's we will continue to go after things and to do things. And then this is also where I want to put in things like addiction and coping and numbing and all of these things. Oftentimes, again, we will be living these lives where we're heading for things and going for things and doing things that we genuinely think that we want, that we genuinely think is what we should be doing, what would make us a good person, what is the right thing to do. And because it's conditioning, and because it's programming, and because it's living for our parents' approval and not living for actual reality, it hurts. And we're struggling, and it's hard. And we will find ourselves sabotaging ourselves over and over again. We'll find ourselves in cycles of addiction and numbing and coping and stimulating and thinking there's something wrong with me. And then we think, if I can just get rid of the numbing thing, if I can just get rid of the addiction, if I can just get rid of the mental illness, if I can just get rid of the thing that's wrong with me, and I'm putting that in quotes, I will then be able to successfully go after this life that I want, and it'll feel great. When the reality is, if you were to take away the addiction, if you were to take away the whatever it is that you think is wrong with you, how you're coping with this life that doesn't match what you want and what actually feels good for you, there would actually be more pain. Now you're just someone who hates your job and doesn't have a thing to go to make the pain go away. Now you're just someone who's in all these relationships that don't actually feel good to you, but you don't have any way to numb it out. You're not mentally ill. You are cognitively in dissonance about your life. Your emotions are telling you that this doesn't feel good, and you keep trying to force yourself to do this thing that doesn't feel good, and it's never going to feel good because the results and reality are telling you this isn't real, this isn't good, this isn't your actual life path that's ever going to feel good to you. But it's programmed in that, again, it equals safety. So this is why, again, trying to change what we're doing, trying to take a different path is so difficult. To even be able to recognize that we're going after something that we were programmed that if I did this, mommy and daddy would love me, is already hard enough. Because like I said, you're going to have all these other stories of evidence that you've collected over your lifetime that have made your childhood stories make sense in your adulthood. You're not going to even see that it was a childhood story for a while. You have to keep questioning and questioning, okay, why is this going to make me a good person? Why am I doing this? What do I think I'm going to get out of this? And then what? And then what? And then what? And we're finally going to get at, and then if I achieve this, if I get there, if I do it, I will have perfect safety. I will have a perfect life. I will be approved of. Everyone will love me, and then I'll be safe. And the pain will go away. And that's why we go after it so hard. And this is why when we try to change, to do something different, when we try to go off on a different path, when we try to say, okay, this isn't the path that works for me, I've realized what I really want, I realize who I really want to be, I'm going to try and go against my conditioning, a lot of the time it feels way worse in the beginning. And for some people, we never actually are able to get over the conditioning to trust a different path. Because again, it's programmed into your body that you're going to die if you don't do this. It's programmed into your body that if and when I finally become what mommy and daddy wanted me to become, what caregivers wanted me to become, I will finally be safe. And we pursue it, and we pursue it, and we pursue it at the cost of so much most of the time. Because in our bodies, we really believe, I just have to do it better. I just have to get there a little bit closer. I just have to keep pushing. And so many people, I think, are just like, right, they're lost in their careers, they're lost in their lives, they're lost in their physical bodies, they're lost in all of these things because they're not even realizing that the thing that they're pushing towards is directly the thing that is hurting them and harming them, because somewhere deep inside they believe if I just get there, I'm going to have perfect love and perfect safety. And that's why, again, when we try to go a different way, when we try to let it go, when we try to do something different, our nervous systems are going to freak the fuck out. It's not necessarily going to feel better to try to pursue what matters to you and what's true to you and what feels good to you, especially if that wasn't just like not understood or minimized by your caregivers. But if there was some sort of negative repercussion for being the way that you really are, or doing what you really wanted to do, or pursuing a life that actually mattered to you, if there was rejection, if there was abandonment, if there was trauma, if there was abuse attributed to that, your nervous system is going to remember that as that's how we die. That's how we make sure we never get our needs met. So we will literally stay in a situation where we are in constant pain and needing to numb and needing to cope and needing to be addicted to these things and needing to stimulate and do all of these things that are so painful, because that still feels safer to our nervous systems and like we're gonna be safer. than if we start to go after what actually feels good to us and what we really want, because our nervous systems learn deep in our childhoods that that is going to equal death, because that is going to get you rejected. Right? So when I first started to say, okay, I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to move to Asia. I'm not Christian anymore. I'm leaving my family, whatever, like, right? Like I'm not close to my family. I'm not going to give my parents grandchildren. I'm going to go do this other life that I want to do. There was absolutely a part of me that felt great doing that this is what I wanted to do and this is how it was going to be, and that was great. And there was a part of me that was continually having an existential crisis for like the first 6 years. Like constantly horrified that I'm a bad person. What am I doing? I've totally gone off the rails. This isn't safe. This isn't okay. This underlying feeling of never being safe and never being okay, no matter how safe and okay I actually was, that was coming from the fact that I was completely contradicting my programming. To my nervous system, I was starting to express in ways that had gotten me rejected as a child. I was starting to, like I say, just live a totally different life that was not getting my parents' approval. And I felt like I was gonna die a lot of the time. Because again, my conditioning and my programming was continually telling me, if you keep going this way, you're never gonna get your needs met. You're never gonna have what you need. You are going to die. So again, as much as my feelings of the actual outcomes that I was getting, so even though I was having success in my career and success in my relationships, and life was way better for me over here, and life was way better for me in these new patterns, just results I was getting in life. I wasn't super depressed and alone and caught in my bed and couldn't do anything like I was when I was growing up. Life was objectively better, and yet I was horrified most of the time. And my body kept telling me, but this is not going to last. This is all going to fall apart. This cannot stay being good, because you have strayed so far from what is actually good and safe. You are a bad person. Yeah? Okay, I'm so glad that's normal. The existential crisis is just incessant couple years now. Absolutely. When we are contradicting our conditioning, our nervous systems are constantly going to be on the lookout for how we're going to die, because that's what our nervous system is for. Our nervous system is trying to get us to do the thing that we were trained to do in our childhoods so that we will be safe. That is why we will pursue at all costs a path that has nothing to do with what's good for us, and we will continue to self-sabotage and continue to put ourselves in precarious situations so that our parents have to come and rescue us, or that people have to come rescue us, or and I think the last thing I want, and this is why, again, when we try to pursue what is real for us and what is true for us, it will feel horrible and scary and frightening a lot of the time, because our nervous systems are just like, no, this is what you have to do to be safe, and anything that you do over here is going to lead to your death. You are not going to be safe, you're not going to be okay, you're not going to get your needs met. So this is why, again, you're not addicted, you're not self-sabotaging, you're not just doing the same thing over and over again expecting different results because you're insane. Your body is programmed that these are the behaviors, this is the way you have to be, this is what you have to do in order to be a good person, and that will get you your needs met. And no matter the chaos and the destruction and all the stuff that's coming along with it, all the pain that's coming along with it, you're gonna keep pursuing it. And then in order to keep pursuing it, you have to numb and cope and do all these things about the pain. The pain that is going to be inevitable with living a life that doesn't actually align with what's true for you and what's true in reality. Because again, most of us got conditioning from parents who were completely imperfect, from caregivers who did not know how reality actually worked, and we were trained in all these sorts of ways that are out of sync with reality. And so we're living these lives trying to live up to that expectation of, if I just am this way, my caregivers will finally love me and then I will be safe. When in real reality, It's causing pain, it's causing destruction, it's not working. We can't see that because all the stories we've built on top of it about how our conditioning is true, and all the stories that we've used to get rid of any other option so that we don't feel confused. And we really think we're on the path. We really think we're doing what we should be doing. And then what's wrong with me that I'm coping and addicted and numbing and self-sabotaging? I'm just weak, I'm just lazy, I just keep doing all these things over and over again. No. You have needs that you don't know how to meet. You're living a path that doesn't work for you. You were trained that you're not allowed to be who and what you actually are. Your nervous system is programmed to do this path that isn't in alignment with real reality. And then to do something different is going to feel like death. It's going to feel like you are walking off a plank, because to your nervous system, you are. You are rebelling from the thing that you were programmed in the very early stages of your life, that this is what you have to do and this is what you have to be in order to be safe. And then again, we will continually seek after our caregivers' love and affection in the form of our actual caregivers, in the form of other people that we project our caregivers onto, in the form of God, in the form of whatever it is that we're trying to appease in the universe. Continually believing that if we just become acceptable enough, we will be safe. We will be codependent with almost all of our relationships. We will be codependent with the world. We will continue to try to be what people want us to be. We will reject ourselves and don't know how to connect with our emotions and all that stuff, because we're just trying to be acceptable, because in our bodies and our nervous systems, to be accepted by people is to be provided for, is to be safe, is to be loved, and therefore is to survive and be able to live and express and do all of these things. This is why we are all so afraid of rejection. Because in that early codependent relationships we had with our caregivers, rejection was death. When our caregivers didn't care for us, we could not get our needs met any other way. We needed their approval. Now as an adult, we don't need that so much. So again, don't misunderstand me that I'm saying now as an adult, no one ever has to love you and you can just do whatever the fuck you want and be rejected by absolutely everyone and be totally fine. It's a fine balance, because we are interdependent. But as adults, most of us have a lot more freedom to be who and what we actually are, and to get rejected and to be misunderstood and to still be okay than we think we do. But that is going to require that, right, we do all of this. Why am I really doing what I'm doing? Why am I really pursuing what I'm pursuing? Where did my rules for what a good and a bad person actually come from? And is this true in real reality? Are my feelings and my outcomes matching my stories? And if not, it's time to question the story. Don't question reality and don't question your feelings, because that is what we have been trained to do in our society. When our logic doesn't match our feelings, there must be something wrong with my feelings. There's something wrong with my emotions, there's something wrong with my body, there's something wrong with my reaction to this. Because logically, what is happening is fine. So if I'm having a negative reaction, there's something wrong with me. No. That's the first thing. Start to make room for your feelings. So again, we can have feelings and be wrong about what we think those feelings mean. We can have emotions and be wrong about what we think those emotions mean. What we want to start to do is to validate the feelings that we're having as being real. We feel what we feel, and we feel it for a reason. And then we're going to get curious as to why we feel it, instead of assuming we already know. That's emotional mastery, is the feeling is there, the feeling is legitimate. We make room for it, we legitimize the feeling, we say it's there for a reason, and then I'm willing to get curious and get on my own side. So compassion. I am not broken, I am not bad, and shame and guilt are always lies. So when I'm telling myself I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I feel this way because I am shitty, I did something wrong, I am horrible, blah, 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 that's not reality. You are not to be shamed, and you are not guilty. Even if you've caused harm, even if there is a part of this where you need to make amends, you can feel the genuine pain of that and feel bad about that, and then make amends. But it's not because you are fundamentally a bad person. It's not because you are fundamentally flawed. We make mistakes. We do things out of conditioning, out of programming. That's all reality. We make mistakes. We cause harm. We do painful things. But it's not because we are fundamentally flawed and bad and sinful in nature. It's because we're working from misunderstanding, always. So we get curious about our feelings, we get compassionate with our behavior. And then again, we start to actually look at our outcomes and weigh them against the expected outcomes we're supposed to be getting. We look at our stories. What do I think should be happening? What should I be getting? What should be the outcome of this? And is that the actual reality? Is that what I'm actually getting? Am I actually getting safety? Am I actually getting provision? Am I actually getting happiness? Am I actually getting fulfillment? Or not? And if not, reality is not wrong. So your feelings are not wrong. Reality is not wrong. Our thoughts are probably wrong. Our perception is probably wrong. And that is not your fault. You inherited that. You learned that. So we have to hack it by continuing to tune in and to compare real reality and our feelings to what we think should be happening. And we gotta start to believe in our feelings and believe in reality more than we believe in our thoughts. When there's a contradiction, the story is probably incorrect. Reality doesn't lie, outcomes don't lie, your feeling and response isn't lying. So can we get curious and compassionate? And then the main point of this video is that you are not doing anything to intentionally hurt yourself or hurt others. You are not trapped in cycles of addiction or overworking or numbing or scapegoating or not pursuing what you really want to be doing or self-sabotage, or you're not confused and lost and hopeless as to who you want to be and what you want to do because there's just some moral failing in you. It's never that. You're doing what your programming has been telling you your entire life you need to do. That's why you are where you are. That's why you're doing what you're doing. That's why you're doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Because in your nervous system somewhere, it says if you do something different, you're going to die. And it says if you do this perfectly, you're finally going to be safe and loved and given everything that you want. So we have to start to have compassion for ourselves. No one is intentionally hurting themselves or hurting others. Everyone is doing what their programs are telling them to do. And the way that we become awake to our programs is to start to trust our feelings, to start to connect with our feelings, to start to connect with compassion and curiosity. Where did this come from? We start to dissect our stories. We start to look for actual consequence versus what we think should be happening. All of my videos, all this stuff, again, this is not simple. I don't have and here's how you get rid of your childhood conditioning, because that doesn't exist. There's many steps and lots of things you're going to do over and over and over again to help you realize your conditioning, to help you realize your emotions, to help you realize what reality is, to help you realize your perceptions. It's the thing you're going to work with for the rest of your life. But I can tell you, the more you start with compassion, the more you have curiosity for yourself, the more progress you're going to make. There is nothing wrong with you. We're all living for our caregiver's approval. We're all living for our caregiver's approval on some level, because somewhere inside of us we really believe, then I'm going to be approved of, then I'm going to get all my needs met. When we're lonely and scared and we feel unsafe and we feel like the world is crashing down around us, we're going to go to our conditioning even harder. Even if it's pursuing our conditioning that's causing us all of our pain, we're going to drive it even harder. The more pain it causes us, the more we're going to be triggered into doing it more. Because to us, that's the solution. Literally, our bodies believe the thing that's causing us pain is the solution to our pain. That's how conditioning works. That's why the worse it gets, the worse it'll get. So we have to have compassion for ourselves. Compassion. What do I want? Safety, freedom, love, approval, so I can have, right? We live in this reality that's very chaotic. The more scared we are, the more into our conditioning we're going to go until we start to get on top of it and then understand that that's going to lead to existential crisis, and we do it anyways. Slowly, sometimes with therapy, sometimes with help, sometimes with journaling, sometimes with tools like this, all the tools in your toolbox. There's no wrong amount of tools. Okay? So just start to look at yourself and your patterns and the pain and the stuff you're using to cover up your pain as not something wrong with you. You're trying to do what you think you need to do to be a good person so that you will get all of your needs met. If you start with that understanding, can you start to look at your behavior through that lens? What if that's what it is? You're trying to get your needs met the best way you know how. That's why you're doing everything you're doing. So if that's reality, can we have compassion, curiosity, use these tools? Okay? So that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Always, I love hearing from you. And until next week, have a fantastic day, night, evening, week, whatever it is that you're going to have, and I'll see you then.